Tonight, San Francisco was cold and damp. Rain drizzled onto the cobblestone sidewalks, gathering in little puddles beneath the awnings of late-night cafes. Ethan Carter, a talented yet exhausted video game designer, stood helplessly in front of his own apartment door. He searched his jacket pockets, his backpack, then patted down his jeans. His keys, gone, lost somewhere in a day full of deadlines and mental fog. He cursed softly under his breath, shoulders drooping under the steady mist. It was nearly midnight, and calling a locksmith at this hour felt pointless and defeating. He looked down the empty hallway, the dim yellow lights casting his shadow long and lonely against the damp walls. Just then, a gentle voice called from the doorway next to his. "Are you okay?" Ethan turned. There stood Isabella Moore, the neighbor he'd only ever nodded to in passing. She wore a soft cream sweater and cradled a steaming mug of tea in her hands. Her brown eyes shone with quiet concern, and somehow that warmth cut through the chill pressing into Ethan's bones. He gave a sheepish smile and nodded. "I lost my keys. Sorry if I'm disturbing you." Isabella pushed her door open wider. The glow of her cozy living room spilled out into the cold corridor, inviting and comforting. "It's raining out. You can't stand here all night. Come in, have some tea, wait until morning, then figure it out." Ethan hesitated for a heartbeat, but the cold and Isabella's unexpected kindness won him over. He stepped into her apartment, a small but tidy space filled with the calming scent of lavender and lemongrass oil. She poured him a fresh cup of tea and sat across from him, her smile soft and patient. "Make yourself at home. At least tonight you won't have to stand alone in the rain." Ethan looked at her, feeling the warmth seep into his chilled fingers through the porcelain mug. In that fleeting moment, he had no idea that this rainy night would quietly rewrite the course of his life, starting with a simple, gentle invitation. Isabella's small apartment wasn't fancy, but it was warm in a way Ethan hadn't felt in a long time. After the steaming cup of tea, he sat on her soft couch and watched her bustle around, offering cookies, fetching a spare blanket, fussing just enough to make him feel cared for. They talked about ordinary things. Outside, rain still tapped against the windows, but inside, there was only the soft amber glow of a lamp and the faint aroma of lavender drifting through the room. Every time Isabella laughed, her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, her hair falling naturally around her shoulders, her hands moving quickly to tidy up, as if she were afraid of burdening him. That night, Ethan drifted off without realizing it, wrapped in her spare blanket on her couch. He slept deeply. No nightmares, no sudden jolts awake. The kind of rest he hadn't known for months under the weight of deadlines. By morning, he woke to the quiet clinking of cups. Isabella was in the kitchen brewing coffee, her hair tied back, her smile gentle when she noticed him stir. They said goodbye at her door. Isabella handed him a small paper-wrapped cookie, telling him to have a bite while waiting for the locksmith. Ethan walked down to the street with his still damp backpack, but inside it felt like a tiny lantern had been lit, flickering to life every time he thought of her, Isabella's image. Her eyes, her laughter, her warmth on that rainy night lingered stubbornly in Ethan's mind all day long. A week after that rainy night, Ethan was back in his familiar whirlwind of deadlines and tension. He sat tucked away in a quiet corner of Moonlight Cafe, his go-to spot for early mornings and late-night brainstorming marathons. In front of him, his laptop displayed a fairy tale forest scene from the new children's adventure game he was developing. Beside it lay a stack of scribbled sketches of talking animal characters. Every detail had to be perfect. Charming visuals, a warm storyline, something that would touch children's hearts. But today, his mind felt clogged and slow. Even though the latte by his elbow had long gone cold, Ethan couldn't tear his eyes from the messy codes and half-finished drawings. The pressure to launch the game before Christmas was squeezing every drop of air from his lungs. A soft giggle from the barista drew him out of his trance. At that moment, the cafe door swung open, letting in a swirl of crisp air and the comforting scent of fresh coffee. Isabella stepped inside, hair draped over her shoulders, her light coat damp from the mist outside. She scanned the room and caught Ethan's eyes. An unexpected smile bloomed on her lips, shy yet warm enough to thaw something tight in his chest. Ethan nodded a polite greeting, about to bury himself back in work, but Isabella had already made her way to his table. "Hi, Ethan, working late again?" He chuckled, voice a bit hoarse from hours of silence. "Hi, Isabella, just tweaking a few scenes before I send them to the art team tomorrow morning." She smiled and glanced at the laptop screen, taking in the pandas, squirrels, and bunnies dancing across his rough sketches. Then her eyes flicked to his abandoned latte. "You've been here forever, huh? May I get you a fresh cup of ginger tea?" "Better than cold coffee." Before Ethan could protest, Isabella turned and headed to the counter. He shook his head, but an involuntary smile tugged at his lips. A few minutes later, she returned with a steaming mug of ginger tea, but in that same heartbeat, a young customer passing behind her accidentally bumped into Isabella. Time seemed to slow. The cup slipped from her hands and tipped straight onto Ethan's table, splashing tea across his sketches, laptop, everything. Isabella froze, hands trembling, her voice breaking in panic. "Oh my God, Ethan, I'm so sorry. I'm such a klutz." Hot tea seeped into weeks of pencil lines and notes, dripped toward the laptop's edge. Ethan flinched back just in time to avoid a burn, but the sight of Isabella's stricken face swept away any frustration he might have felt. He let out a soft laugh and grabbed a handful of napkins to blot the spill. "It's fine, really. It's just paper. The laptop's okay. Maybe I'll come up with something better when I redraw it." Isabella's cheeks flushed, her eyes glistening. "I swear I'll make this up to you. I could help sketch, maybe. I used to win kids' drawing contests back in school." Ethan burst out laughing. The sound was light, unburdened, like a fresh breeze scattering the fog that had hung over him all week. "If you're serious, I'd love to have you help, Isabella." Inside the cafe, warmth and laughter mixed with the spicy aroma of ginger tea, and somewhere deep in Ethan's mind, a thought flickered quietly. Maybe he'd just rediscovered the spark he'd been missing all along. After the ginger tea accident at Moonlight Cafe, Ethan and Isabella unintentionally became the pair that the baristas whispered about. Every time they came in, staff would grin and nudge each other. "Look, they're sharing a table again." At first, they really just meant to sit together so Isabella could help Ethan re-sketch the cute animal characters for his new game. She was surprisingly quick with a pencil, her lines soft and innocent, exactly like a child's doodles. Ethan tweaked the plot lines as Isabella chimed in with spontaneous, whimsical ideas. But soon, these work sessions stretched longer than planned. They laughed over whether the panda should have darker spots or if the bunny should wear nerdy glasses. Sometimes, in between jokes, Isabella would share sweet little stories about the kids she cared for at the therapy center. Ethan always fell silent then, watching her eyes shine when she spoke of her tiny patients. Over time, as they spent countless evenings sketching and laughing, Isabella's stories about the children made Ethan more and more curious. One evening, moved by her dedication, he asked if he could see her world himself, and Isabella gladly invited him to visit the center. She wanted him to see exactly how her little audience responded to the simplest stories. Ethan stood quietly in a corner of the colorful playroom, walls covered in children's drawings and craft paper. He watched Isabella kneel on the floor next to a shy boy piecing together a puzzle. Her patience, her warm laughter, her gentle questions, they slowly chipped away at the invisible walls the boy had built around himself. When Isabella looked up and caught Ethan's gaze, she tilted her head with a soft, knowing smile. In that instant, Ethan understood. No matter how beautiful his digital worlds were, they would never mean as much as the comfort Isabella gave these children in real life. After that visit, Ethan invited Isabella to his personal workspace at his studio, an attic lined with wooden beams overflowing with sketch pads, character boards, and fluffy panda models scattered everywhere. Isabella walked slowly, fingers brushing each piece of art, her eyes wide like a child wandering through a secret fairy tale. "You know," she said quietly, "if kids had a world like this, they'd find so much courage to face scary things." Her words struck something deep inside Ethan. He realized then why he needed this girl by his side. Not just to help draw cute animals, but to remind him why he had begun this journey in the first place. That night, when he walked Isabella to the lobby downstairs, Ethan reached for her hand for the first time. The light squeeze spoke for him. From this moment on, they would build something good and lasting together, for the children who needed it most. In the days after their visit to the therapy center, Ethan and Isabella naturally wrapped into each other's everyday life like two vines finding the same sturdy branch. Most mornings, when work didn't demand an early start, Ethan would meet Isabella at the bus stop near his studio. They'd share a quick cup of street-side coffee before going their separate ways. And most nights, if Ethan didn't have to pull an all-nighter tweaking code, he'd invite Isabella back to Moonlight Cafe, which had practically become their portable office. People were used to seeing them by the window, shoulders almost touching, sharing a slice of cake, bickering playfully about whether a ferret or a bear should have more facial expressions in the new game. Once, Isabella dozed off while sketching beside him. Ethan didn't move an inch, afraid any shift might wake her, so he just sat there, letting her breathe softly against his shoulder as mellow jazz played in the background. He stored every tiny moment like that, afraid that if he blinked, this warmth might slip through his fingers. One afternoon, Isabella called Ethan to the therapy center urgently. She wanted him to witness a small story, the story of Liam, a 6-year-old boy she had been helping. From the hallway, Ethan watched the little boy curl up silently in a corner at first. But within minutes, Isabella's gentle patience coaxed out a rare smile. Liam whispered a few shy words, his voice shaky yet bright with hope. Outside the room, Ethan whispered, "You really do have magic, Isabella." She just laughed, her eyes shimmering as she replied, "It's not magic, just patience and love." In that moment, Ethan knew his new game needed Isabella, not just as an idea contributor, but as its heart, the soul that would make it real enough to reach children who were scared of the world outside. Another night, Isabella was doodling a little fox for the game. When she accidentally brushed her hand against Ethan's, he froze, staring at their fingers tangled together. Neither spoke, neither pulled away first. When Isabella finally withdrew her hand, Ethan hesitated, then slowly let go. In that brief silence, their eyes said what words could not. They were no longer just co-creators. They were keepers of an unspoken promise that had quietly taken root. That night, back at his desk, Ethan sat blankly before his laptop. The blinking cursor faded behind the flood of images of Isabella, her laughter, her pencil-smudged hands, the warmth in her eyes. All of it wrapped around him like a comforting light that chased away his exhaustion. He realized Isabella had become part of his life, gently, naturally, and more precious than he'd ever expected. Winter arrived faster than anyone expected. San Francisco was swallowed by sudden downpours, and gusts of wind howling down every street. One weekend night, Ethan invited Isabella to his studio for a late work session. He'd just finished the final sketch for a key scene in the game. When Isabella arrived, she brought 2 boxes of steaming takeout. They sat by the attic window, eating together and debating whether the game's ending should stay open or if the character deserved a real, loving home. Outside, rain pounded down in sheets. Wind rattled the old window panes. When Isabella started to pack up her things to leave, Ethan glanced at his phone and froze. The storm had hit earlier than forecast. He stepped out onto the small balcony, looking down at the flooded street. Cars had already stalled mid-road, stranded in rising water. He rushed back in, breathless. "Isabella, you can't go now. It's too dangerous. The storm's here." Isabella turned to the rain streaking across the window, then back at him, and gave a tiny nod. Ethan rummaged through a cabinet, pulled out a spare blanket, and cleared a corner for her to rest safely. They sat close, wrapped in the soft glow of the old desk lamp. Rain hammered the metal roof above. Wind howled through cracks in the attic walls. But right there, shoulder to shoulder, the chaos outside felt miles away. Isabella leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, her voice a breath against his neck. I'm sorry for always making you worry." Ethan looked at her. In the warm light, stray strands of her hair brushed her cheek, her warmth seeping into his skin. He felt his heart pounding. Because of her. "Isabella, listen to me." He took her hand, holding it gently but firmly, like he was afraid to lose something precious. "I've wanted to say this for so long. I like you. So much. I don't just want to build games with you. I want to protect you, be with you, in storms and sunshine." Isabella froze, lifting her head to meet his eyes. In her gaze, the same storm that roared outside seemed to soften into gentle rain. She didn't speak. Instead, she cupped his cheek and pressed her lips softly to his, a kiss so light, yet powerful enough to push the raging storm a few miles further away. When she pulled back, she whispered, "Me too, Ethan. I like you so much." That night, inside the small attic, while the city outside battled wind and rain, they shared their first embrace, their first confession, and their first quiet promise that with each other, every storm would feel a little lighter. After that stormy night, one thing was certain. Ethan and Isabella were no longer just partners or close friends. They had stepped into a new chapter where their hearts kept no secrets anymore. Their work sessions at Moonlight Cafe now often included secret hand-holding under the table, or a shared look when a bright idea struck. On nights when Ethan coded late into dawn, he'd brew tea for Isabella, while she'd sneak a cookie into his hand whenever he forgot to eat, too focused on the screen. They didn't hide their relationship at work. In truth, everyone at the studio had known long before. They were just waiting for the couple to admit it themselves. Every time Isabella dropped by the studio, teammates would tease Ethan with knowing smirks that made him blush but secretly thrilled. One late evening, the two of them stood on the studio rooftop, watching the city sparkle under a blanket of lights. Isabella rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, her voice soft and hesitant. "Aren't you scared that maybe someday I won't be here anymore, not by your side every day?" Ethan tightened his arm around her, eyes scanning the vast, whispering city. "I'm not scared, because I believe no matter where you are, you'll always be here." He laid his hand over his heart. "And I'll always be in yours." Isabella let out a quiet laugh as a tear slipped free, but it was a tear of pure, overflowing joy. She knew they'd weathered enough storms together to trust in tomorrow. Their fresh, blossoming love faced its first real test sooner than either of them expected. Isabella was awarded a scholarship for a 3-month advanced trauma therapy program for children at a renowned center in Boston. She told Ethan the news while they were tucked into their usual corner at Moonlight Cafe. Ethan froze, eyes fixed on her glowing face, while his fingers tightened around his coffee cup, grounding himself. He knew how much this opportunity meant to her, but 3 months apart felt like an endless winter with no promise of spring. "What do you think?" Isabella's voice was quiet, almost afraid to meet his eyes. Ethan drew a deep breath and reached across the table for her hand. "I'm gonna miss you so much, but I want you to go. I want you to become the best version of yourself. 3 months can't break us." They held each other for a long time the night before Isabella's flight. Ethan saw her off at the airport, eyes red but lips curved into a smile, while Isabella buried her face in his chest, breathing him in like she could pack his warmth in her suitcase. In Boston, the time difference and hectic days tested them both. Isabella was buried under practical workshops and intense exams, while Ethan drowned in deadlines for the game's final tweaks. Late replies, dropped video calls, and patchy Wi-Fi sometimes left only heavy silence between them. Yet it was within that silence that they learned to understand each other deeper. Ethan started waking up earlier than usual just to whisper good morning before Isabella rushed to her classes. Isabella, exhausted from lectures, would curl up on her dorm bed, laptop balanced on her stomach, waiting to hear his voice even for a few sleepy minutes. By the 4th weekend, Ethan surprised her. He secretly flew to Boston, waiting outside her training center with a bouquet of yellow tulips, her favorite flower. When she spotted him, Isabella ran straight into his arms, forgetting all her fatigue and stress. They had only 2 days together, stealing bites of sandwiches in the park, wandering old cobblestone streets under Boston's crisp, late autumn sky. Each hug, each touch reaffirmed what they both now knew. 3 months apart could never loosen the bond they'd built. It only made it stronger. When Ethan had to return to San Francisco, they lingered outside her dorm, unwilling to let go. Isabella pressed her face to his chest, voice muffled. "I'm scared there will be more distances like this in the future." Ethan smoothed her hair and whispered, "Trust me, Isabella, if we can survive this, no distance will ever break us." 3 months later, when Isabella completed her course and flew home, Ethan waited at the arrival's gate, another bouquet of yellow tulips in hand. When she ran into him, he held her so tightly it felt like their two hearts beat as one. In that embrace they understood. Every test only matured their love. One season apart had proven they belonged to each other, no matter the city, no matter the time zone. 3 months apart had taught Ethan and Isabella the deeper meaning of what it truly meant to be together. The day Isabella came back to San Francisco, they found themselves back at Moonlight Cafe, the place where everything began. Her hand rested on his, her eyes still as clear as the first day, but now steadier, more serene. Ethan knew then he didn't want to wait any longer. One quiet weekend evening, he took Isabella to the beach, where the city melted into the colors of sunset. The sea breeze tangled her hair. Her eyes sparkled as she watched the restless waves crash against the shore. Ethan stopped, his heart thudding wildly, just like the first time he'd seen her standing in the rain the night he lost his keys. He dropped to one knee, voice trembling but sure. "Isabella, do you remember? It all started because I lost a key. But that's how I found my whole world. You. I don't want to lose you for even one more second. Will you marry me?" Isabella covered her mouth, eyes brimming with tears. She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Ethan slipped a simple silver ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, ignoring the waves and the salty wind swirling around them. The wedding took place in a small garden strung with warm fairy lights and soft acoustic music drifting through the night air. Friends, studio teammates, and children from the therapy center, everyone came to bless the couple. Isabella wore a simple white dress and held a bouquet of yellow tulips, her eyes locked on Ethan waiting beneath an arch of flowers. Each step she took toward him replayed every memory: their first rainy night, the cafe, sleepless nights, promises whispered through time zones. As they exchanged vows, Ethan held her hands, his eyes bright like the first time he called her name in the rain. "I promise never to lose this key again, the key that opens your heart." The reception was filled with laughter, happy tears, and blessings whispered over clinking glasses. Later that night, when it was just the two of them, Isabella rested her head on Ethan's shoulder and whispered, "It turns out every rainstorm, every rough night was only to bring us back together." Ethan smiled, kissing the top of her head. "And from now on, we'll build our whole world, a world full of sunshine, with you, with me, and nothing to keep us apart again." After their sunny, flower-gilled wedding, Ethan and Isabella officially began life under one roof, a small apartment that overflowed with laughter, warm lamplight, and soft jazz they both adored. In those early days, as husband and wife, they were busy. Ethan poured himself into the next big game project at the studio. Isabella devoted her days to helping children heal. But beneath the busyness, they carried a single, quiet hope: to have a child, a little piece of them both. Every night, after dinner, they would sprawl on the sofa, dreaming aloud about a house with a garden, a swing hanging from an old oak, and a child's laughter echoing down a brick walkway. Weeks turned into months of hopeful waiting, of quiet prayers whispered into the night after each failed test. Then, one morning, while Ethan still slept, Isabella stared at the test strip, trembling in her hands. 2 bright lines. She burst into tears, overwhelmed with joy. Crawling back under the blanket, she wrapped her arms around him and whispered into his ear, "Wake up, you're going to be a dad." Ethan froze for a heartbeat, then bolted upright, hugging her so tight and pressing kisses all over her forehead. His hands shook like the day he slipped a wedding ring on her finger, He kept murmuring, "Thank you, thank you." At their first ultrasound, they sat hand in hand, hearts hammering wildly. When the screen showed two tiny sacs, the doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations, twins, two healthy little girls." Isabella laughed through tears while Ethan stared, barely able to believe his ears. They named them Jasmine and Rose, sweet, delicate names for the two blossoms soon to bloom in their life. From that moment on, Ethan transformed into the ultimate family man. He designed and built a double crib by hand, sanding each rail, painting every corner. He drew butterflies and vines across the nursery walls and strung twinkling fairy lights from the ceiling. Every night, he pressed his ear to Isabella's belly and whispered, "Hi, Jasmine. Hi, Rose. Daddy's here. Grow strong and be gentle to mommy, okay?" Isabella would smile, fingers combing through his hair, eyes glittering with quiet happiness. Sometimes, she'd whisper back to her babies, "My little princesses, your dad is the best man in the world." As the due date drew near, Isabella felt a swirl of excitement and worry. One morning, sharp contractions hit her hard. Ethan panicked but stayed strong, calling an ambulance, clutching her hand through 18 grueling hours of labor filled with sweat, tears, and piercing cries. "You're doing amazing, just a little more." "I'm right here, always." Ethan pressed kisses to her brow, wiped her sweat, and squeezed her hand like he'd never let go. Finally, through the roar of her cries came two new voices. Jasmine arrived first. Rose followed 3 minutes later, their wails bright and fierce, bursting Ethan's heart wide open. Tears streamed down his face as he watched Isabella cradle the tiny swaddled girls against her chest. He gently traced a finger along each baby's tiny hand, whispering promises of a lifetime of love. In that fragile, perfect moment, he knew every sleepless night and every storm had led him right here, to this family, this peace. Isabella, weak but glowing, whispered through happy tears, "We have a family now, Ethan." Ethan wrapped all three in his arms, silently thanking the universe for that spilled coffee cup so long ago, the moment that led him here to this sweetness. As dawn spilled its first golden rays through the hospital window, the family of four slept soundly. Jasmine and Rose dozed in their mother's arms. Ethan lay close, his cheek pressed to Isabella's hair, eyes fluttering shut. Outside, the city woke up to a new day. Inside, a small home had begun a whole new life, a life filled with warmth and love, from a lost key once upon a time to this perfect, peaceful sunrise.